This is TWiT.
So how do you know when someone is telling the truth? Polygraph tests have long been the tool of truth, but they've also been known to be inaccurate, and that has held them back over time. A company called Converus has what it believes to be a solution to the unreliable polygraph, and it involves taking a close look at the human eye. And joining us to talk about EyeDetect is Mark Harris. He's a freelance journalist who wrote about this technology from Wired. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, Jason. Happy to be with you.
It's so great to get you on. Thank you for joining us today. So before we dive into EyeDetect specifically, what would you say has proven to be so incredibly unreliable over time with polygraph tests, which I feel like are like the TV and film, quintessential go-to when trying to prove someone's telling the truth or lying?
Well, where to start, really? I mean, they've got so many problems. Basically, it's well understood. It's pretty well acknowledged by psychologists that when you lie, it requires a little bit more effort on your part, a little bit of cognitive work. And then you can also get excited or nervous, right? You could get sweaty. Perhaps you might start to shake. Who knows? There are many physical signs. Now, what polygraph says is that definitely indicates a lie and that definitely doesn't, right? They have these interpreters, the polygraph examiners that take the polygraph, that administer the polygraph. And those examiners believe that they can determine truth from falsehood. Well, it's been shown many times, actually through a famous National Academy of Sciences report about 15 years ago that really recommended against their use for any kind of screening situation when you're trying to determine whether somebody, is suitable for a job, or perhaps you want to screen them for, an unknown crime like terrorism or some sort of rare crime like that. So they're pretty well acknowledged to have a lot of problems in the way they're administered.
But yet they continue to be used at least to some degree. And then, of course, you wrote and spilled out more detail about something called EyeDetect technology. How does this supposedly improve on the results that you get from a polygraph?
Well, the idea behind it is that instead of getting a human behind the machine, previous stories that I've done for Wired have shown that actually a lot of the bias and problems comes with the human administrator. Well, the Converus situation, the EyeDetect system, says let's take the human out of the loop. Let's make it all algorithmic, right? Let's feed your eyes, and they really just focus in on your eyes, the motion of your where you're looking, how quickly you blink, your pupil dilation. Let's focus on the eyes and see if we can't determine truth from falsehood. And Converus says its EyeDetect system detects that with an 86% accuracy rate, which is quite a lot more than polygraphs, which scientists put anywhere between about 55 and 65%. So on paper it sounds like a great system. It takes the human out of it, and because there's no human in the loop, it's just you sitting in front of a webcam, basically answering questions on a screen. It's much cheaper and quicker too, and that's obviously attractive to to anybody who currently uses the polygraphs, and that includes most of the police departments in the US who use it for screening out potential employees.
So I think you can start with the sentence, you take the human out of the loop, and then there's trouble, especially when you're talking about bias. Like we've heard that before, like biases don't really exist because it's a machine. And this, like so many other technology that we say, like there's no bias because it's a machine. This also has bias. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You're right, Megan, exactly. I mean, for a start, just by putting a computer in front of you rather than a person, you haven't actually removed the bias. The bias can be inherent in the algorithms. Perhaps the system trained only on a certain population, right? Perhaps only men, perhaps only white people. And how does that apply to other people? We just don't know. Nobody really knows. And in fact, nobody's done any scientific research on this EyeDetect system apart from, Converus and EyeDetect and the scientists who developed it. So, for a start, we don't even know how that works. And then secondarily, any system that involves, human beings is open to bias, right? And so in my research for the story, I found that when the examiners didn't like the answers that EyeDetect was giving them, they put their fingers on the scale. They changed the results. For instance, when an applicant to a police department was a previous police officer but failed the test, they tweaked the results so that the police officer would pass, right? Because they said, oh, it's probably nothing, we find that police officers have a less layer of guilt, will change the sensitivity. And on the other side of it, when an applicant was someone from an inner city, a place that had previously had some problems with, violence and gangs, they passed a polygraph, they passed the EyeDetect test, and guess what? The examiner said, I think they might be to do with gangs. Can we change the result? And sure enough, they dialed down the algorithm and the applicant failed. So, we're kind of left with the worst of both worlds. It's a system that can scale up really quickly and cheaply, and yet it still has many, if not all, of the problems that polygraph suffers from.
Wow. It's crazy hearing you describe how so easily these results are just kind of adjusted on the fly. That's pretty weird.
Humans are fallible?
That never happens. We're perfect. So you were actually subjected to the test in research for this story. Did it work? Were you nervous? What was your experience like?
Well, I thought I'd put myself through it, and Converus offered to put me through the test. So I went to one of these testing places, and this is a testing place that tests real applicants for police jobs. And the test was really low stress. It was basically felt like I am right now, looking into a web camera at a computer. It asked me to think of a number between 1 and 10. And then it would guess which one I'd thought of by asking me various questions about the numbers. And it was all very stress-free and easy. I tried to hide my emotions. And actually the first time I took the test, it got the number wrong because we had a miscommunication about what constitutes a number between 1 and 10, if you can believe it. I thought it included the numbers from 1 to 10, but apparently they only wanted me to choose 2 to 9. So it both missed my number, but it also missed the fact that I was thinking outside the box, that I wasn't in its range.
Yeah.
The second time I did the test, it actually got the number right, and I have to say that was a little unsettling, right? It was a little bit, it felt like I'd been tricked.
Wow.
So you write that the assumption is that deception is cognitively more demanding than telling the truth. Now, is that true for everyone? I mean, that's what I've always thought, like that liars can just lie. Like I can barely tell the truth. You might think I'm lying. Like sometimes if I'm nervous, I'm a nervous person. But is it cognitively more difficult for everyone to tell the truth?
No one knows. And no one really knows what constitutes those sort of emotional arousal. They call it arousal, which sounds, sort of erotic, but it actually just means like, being excited or nervous. Right. And so a big part of Converus's thing was they're saying the test is only really accurate if people are feeling arousal, if they're feeling in jeopardy, right? If they're feeling that these answers, matter to them. But, I think you could easily argue that if you had nothing to fear, you might go into it quite blasé and say, I've got nothing to fear. I don't feel any jeopardy. And then you might fail the test. And then vice versa, you might be super nervous to all the questions. And, we just really don't know that there haven't been enough tests. And the tests, even that Converus did, some of those came with quite worrying results. There was a test done by the National Security Agency, which obviously is interested in these kinds of technologies. And they tested it on their employees, asking them whether they'd committed a real but a minor security violation, taking a cell phone into an area they weren't allowed to take it into, not actually taking pictures of anything, but just having a phone on their person. And when they, did that test, they found that, the system was only 50% accurate. It was as good as flipping a coin to tell whether somebody had committed that problem or not. Now, they say they've got better than that since then, but who knows?
Yeah, and I guess what I keep trying to figure out is, and I guess this would be the eternal question for any sort of system that's supposed to tell whether someone's telling the truth or a lie, is what the biological give actually is. If there is one, if there is an obvious biological give that we make as humans when we are lying, what is that? And does it involve the eye? I mean, that makes sense to me as someone who knows nothing about this stuff, but is there actual science there? And I guess that's the challenge here, because this is not an open source project. It's a closed source nature of EyeDetect compared to kind of polygraph, which over time we know how reliable or unreliable it is at this point, but there's years and years and years worth of use. So we've kind of adapted to that to some degree. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's right. And it's even the case that I'm not even sure that Converus, the company that developed the technology, knows it, right? When you develop an algorithm and you use machine learning to help you sort the truth from the false, you don't even really know the mechanisms of what it's looking at. You give it some input data, and that input data is a really good webcam looking at somebody's eye. And then the algorithm crunches through it, relying on your labels of who is guilty and who is innocent to determine the algorithm. So you're right. It's not like we're learning much about science by having this product. It's the way it works is a bit murky, and the way it's actually used in practice is kind of equally so.
I'm reading this book by Meredith Broussard called Artificial Unintelligence, and she works for the MIT Media Lab, and she talks about techno-chauvinism, which is just the idea that people automatically think if it's technical, if you say AI, it's going to be better. It is better. So and I just think this makes me think of that, because it's like, it uses machine learning, so then it's going to be better. And coupled with the fact that, as you say, it's cheaper, and police, they want to save money. So polygraphs are banned in courts, but this system is now going to go through the legal process to see if it can go into courts. I mean, do you think it's going to get through this process?
That's a tough question, right? I hope not. Because, but I worry that it will be, right? If you get perhaps a judge who has less expertise in this, and they're blinded by the science as well, then it becomes, it could become a worrying trend. It already has had it's already been accepted in one court case, in one jurisdiction, I believe in New Mexico. And so the question is, is this going to spread, or will it get snipped in the bud? Like polygraph was very early in its, development, and never really recovered from that, luckily. We all want to know the truth, right? We all want to know whether people are lying or not. And so we have these really good systems, or we have some really well-established systems, open source systems like, the courts and judiciaries, and, evidence-based decision making, and, handing over the decisions to these products, can't really do anything. It can't really be a good thing, right? I think we all have a certain amount of right of privacy within our own head as well about what we think about things, and that we should be judging our behaviors and actions and the evidence rather than, these devices that claim to be able to peer inside our skull.
Especially when you're considering, yes, they may say that EyeDetect's success rate, or let's say failure rate, is lower than that of a polygraph. But still, if it's not close to 100%, if it's not 99.8% or whatever, you're still talking about a lot of false positives over the grand scheme of things over time. And that's not good enough when that could result in someone being incarcerated when they are not guilty, or whatever the case may be. We've got a long way to go.
Yeah. And this isn't even really theoretical. Converse tells me that there is a Middle Eastern country that is intending to use this to screen arriving passengers at customs for terrorism. Now, terrorism is an incredibly small crime. It's a very, very rare crime. Perhaps 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000, 1 in a million. And if you have a product that's even 90% accurate, which Converse doesn't even claim, then you really get most of the signals you get are going to be, the system is going to say that 10% of the people are terrorists, right? Even if only a fraction of 1% of those people are terrorists, right? And how do you solve that? That's a really super worrying, reliance on that, when you could actually be putting your resources in far more proven technologies and proven methods of, preventing terrorism or detecting any sort of crime.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I guess we'll never know. When my kids were littler, I could always tell they were lying, and now they're teenagers, and it's anybody's guess. So if only I could have bottled that up when they were younger, and then put that data into an AI, then... Who
knows? Maybe EyeDetect will soon be an app on your iPhone.
Yes.
Look into this, kid. Are you lying?
Yes.
It could be. It could be. That's the scary thing.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Really good point. Mark Harris, pleasure talking with you. Really appreciate you hopping on to tell us about this story. I know you write for a number of different places. You're an independent journalist. Where do you want people to follow you online?
You can have a look at my Twitter at MEHarris, or just keep an eye out. And please send me tips. I'm always interested in finding out about new technologies that may have a questionable angle to them, particularly when where they meet society as well.